It's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America, we are Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome. Good morning. Thanks so much for being here this morning. We're in the middle here of a mid-show meeting. Yeah, and it was just on. I was just telling you about the story out there about Trump saying that he wants the United States to ban large investors from buying homes, and we know that there are some investors out there that have bought hundreds of thousands of homes and then are renting them out, and therefore there are fewer homes on the market. Therefore, the price of homes have increased, and I know there's a lot of people out there. I know a lot of people out there that are promoting that it's something that should be done. You and I were asking the question, can the federal government do that? We're talking the legalities of it. Can the federal government dictate who buys a home? Who owns a home? Now, we know that local governments through zoning and homeowners associations, which really is I guess, what a pseudo-government entity.
Yeah, right.
With Marxist-like rules. They can say, you need to own your home and live in your home for a couple of years before you rent it out. You can't buy the home and rent it out immediately. And that, in essence, if you do that, might stop investors from buying a home if they can't see a return on anything for 2 or 3 years.
Right.
I believe my homeowners association has that. When you buy the home, you can't immediately rent it out.
Right.
You would have to wait a certain length of time to do that. And so they're not telling you.
But the homeowners association only gets that authority if you agree to that when you buy that home.
When you buy the home.
So it's conditional.
Okay,
and it's a contract
that
you sign with the HOA, and you have decided you're okay with that. You give them that authority by signing that contract. So I don't.
Sorry, I forgot. I'm on the air and I'm sitting here thinking.
Yeah,
Gary, you got to talk while you think.
Well, it's because there's, and the Wall Street Journal wrote about it a couple of years ago about like rent control. Because their point is that SCOTUS may revisit this, and if you're looking, because we talk about rent control, everybody thinks New York City. Right.
Exactly. Right.
So basically, you're talking about any government, local government or federal government, in controlling housing. But when you talk about the federal government controlling who owns the housing, now we have to look at something else. Well, what about multiple family homes? Well, those are owned by corporations.
Mm-hmm.
Apartment buildings are owned,
right,
to a large extent by corporations. Mm-hmm. And so it is one owner, and if you're looking at that, then you're controlling, because if you're talking about, all right, the availability of single-family homes on the marketplace, right? I have an issue with the federal government coming in saying they're going to start controlling ownership, whether it's saying that only individuals can do this. Because, all right, an individual can also be an investor. Because then you start getting down to the purpose of ownership, right? Well, I've been a landlord on and off for 35, here in a few years, it'll be 40 years. I've owned rental properties. A lot of people have. I'm not a big corporate conglomerate last time I checked, and that was yesterday when I logged into my bank account. And according to my bank account, it says, no, you're not. But there are individuals who have the intent of buying property to rent it out. And that's legal. You can do that. So those are, if you're saying, well, we can't have corporations, large corporations, buying up single-family homes, then you get down to the intent. Well, why? Because they're creating rentals, because they're taking inventory off the market. Inventory really is determined by, it really is, it's a supply and demand thing, but it's also, there are different waves of home ownership where we have more people buying houses. I think right now we're in in our area, fairly neutral. It's not either a seller's or buyer's market. I think right now I think it's more of a buyer's market. But it's kind of in the middle. It's really more neutral than anything. So there is this wave of intent by the buyer, right? Well, how is that spurred on? We saw that during the whole before the housing crisis, going back to the creation of the subprime mortgage market. And, well, we're going to incentivize people by essentially putting money in their hands that they otherwise wouldn't qualify for. And then that took the value of houses way, way up artificially because there was a bunch of cash in the hands of people looking for houses. So you have to get down to the intent of these corporations, these companies that buy single-family homes. What are they trying to do? Well, let's say they're trying to create a neighborhood of, I don't know, we've seen this, a little tiny home community. To me, growing up, a tiny home was 1,000 square feet. Now it's apparently only a couple hundred square feet.
300, I guess, because it's on YouTube all the time. Hi, and I'm fascinated by people that live in tiny homes.
Yeah.
That's not for me. I need a bigger home.
Well, I actually own a tiny home that's in my backyard, and my lawnmower lives in it.
Oh, okay. It's 399 square feet and less, apparently, is officially what a tiny home is.
Right.
What jurisdiction does it? I mean, that's just how they view. I've seen that enough. 399 square feet or less.
And I believe in the market demand, which may include companies going in to buy single-family homes. Investors that are looking to buy them up because they're not selling, and then they believe there's going to be, a new wave of demand coming so that the investment will have a return at some point, they believe. Creating a number of rentals. One of the things that happens is, and it's beyond the Airbnb short-term rental scenario, is you go into major cities, you go into areas where the population is growing and people are moving in that don't want to buy just yet because they don't really know they're not familiar with the area, don't know where they're going to live long term. So they're not going to purchase, they're going to rent for the first year or two. This happens with a lot of corporate executives. So there is a demand for that kind of rental. And it's quite often a single family unit because the people living there, they want to rent, but they also want to have a yard. They want to be able to have a dog or some outdoor place, a yard for their kids to play or a barbecue grill, whatever. So when the federal government comes in and says, we want to limit who can own property, that's a huge red flag.
And that to me, not that because we said before, homeowners association can stop companies from buying homes by simply saying you can't rent them.
Right. Yeah.
Or you can't rent them for a certain period of time, and that takes away their incentive.
But that agreement is in place when the purchase is made of that property. So that contract begins, with that HOA agreement at the point of purchase.
Right. Now, do local governments have the ability to do that, or is it just an HOA? I'd love to do some research on that. But this got us to talking about rent control overall, and whether rent control, how did it become constitutional?
Right. How
can a city government come in and say, you can only charge this amount? Because we see what's happening in New York City with the whole Weaver thing. Wall Street Journal laid it out. I mean, it's like, okay, you go in, you get tens of thousands more units, you put rent control on, they don't keep up the maintenance because they can't make a profit on it, so they let it go, and the government comes in and says, okay, you're not doing the right thing, we're taking over the property. That's how you get communism. That's how you get rid of private property. And as we know, that's what Mandani believes and Weaver believes. Well, it all comes from the 1921 Supreme Court case, Block versus Hirsch. No single ruling, though, has ever established that rent control is constitutional.
Right.
The Supreme Court upheld a Washington, D.C. rent control law, recognizing that in times of housing shortages and emergency, the government could regulate rents under its police power to protect the public welfare, even if it restricted property rights. And the ultimate in property rights is I own the property, I wish to rent it out. Price control, price control is part of defeating property rights. There's even an admission because the Supreme Court said your property rights don't matter if there's an emergency and the government wants to do rent control. Well, what's the definition of an emergency? Now, Justice Thomas has expressed an interest on rent control, and a landlord saying that a landlord prevents a landlord from evicting a tenant, and they believe that Thomas is one of them. And if Thomas wants to look at it, probably more want to look at it. It goes, rent control has historically been justified as an emergency measure, but courts have debated if it remains constitutional long term after the initial crisis. Right. And there hasn't been a Supreme Court case on it.
Right.
Because I look at it and just say, forget about what good you think it's going to do. I don't think it does good. I think it hurts the market. But if you think it does good or not, what constitutionally in the Founding Fathers did they believe that the government should put price controls on a landlord, which is in essence taking away your property rights to make that property viable?
Right. Long term.
Long term.
Because if we went into another depression, right? Let's say during the Great Depression. Let's say we got down to a handful, just a few owners of a property, right? Let's say, if we'll kind of combine the topic here of of controlling purchases for corporations and also rent control. But if we were in a depression where only a few relatively controlled the prices, and it was thought that that they were price gouging on rent, right? Mm-hmm. You could see where the courts would say, all right, look, this is a clear case in this case of gouging. You're doing it because you have the ability to do that and you control the entire supply or the brunt of the supply, which is unfair, and the government has a right to limit you temporarily in something like that. But long term, price control isn't that.
Should that be under monopoly laws?
Yeah. And whatever gouging laws that
gouging, gouging,
whatever gouging laws. Well, which again would be the remedy is only temporary. It's not, because price control. When you think of price control on rent, it's been anything but temporary in cities like New York.
Oh no, it's permanent.
Yeah. Exactly.
When you look at it here, they talk about the fact that the Supreme Court has refused to hear all these cases. And they believe it's because the Supreme Court is deferring to the legislature, saying, well, the legislature determines what's an emergency.
Right.
So since we determined you can do it in an emergency, if the government says, well, this is an emergency, well, then the legislature, well, then we go through what the elected representatives of the people call an emergency. We don't determine as the Supreme Court what an emergency is.
Right.
But if it lasts forever, then is it an emergency?
Right.
Well, of course not.
Right. And I think that's kind of where the courts have been. I think the title of the article I found from Wall Street Journal here a few years ago. This goes back to 23. Rent control is constitutionally vulnerable. In other words, it's, if they really got into making, if SCOTUS really got into making a decision on rent control, long-term rent control, there's a case to be made that it is indeed unconstitutional.
Yeah.
That aside from temporary relief.
Well, the Supreme Court must be looking now at all the different things that are viewed as an emergency. Because
which is tough.
Because they never did before. So anything the government says in an emergency is an emergency, even if it isn't.
Right. Yeah.
And I think the Supreme Court's looking at this and saying, okay, now the legislative branch or the executive branch at points is now taking it so far out that this is not an emergency.
Right.
Because does an emergency last forever? What's an emergency? A month? A year? 10 years? 50, half a century? A century? What is an emergency? And they may be looking at it going, all right, the legislature is making, is doing things that are unconstitutional and just using the term emergency because emergency has never been defined in the Constitution.
Right.
Because you can't define emergency in the Constitution because some emergencies could possibly last a year or 5 years.
Right.
Or the Depression, a decade.
Yep.
We are Red Eye Radio.
Brought to you by FPPF, Fuel Power Max.
It's a common road rumor that it's impossible for one-truck owner-operators and even carriers with just 2 or 3 trucks to get freight direct from the source, the shipper. Yet, hard-won experience from untold numbers of owner-operators with authority disproves the notion. Search your home base area and, later, frequent freight destinations to find all the manufacturers, distributors, and other shippers in the area. Once you get that list, ask yourself if those companies know who you are and what you do. If not, you're leaving opportunities on the table. Strive to own your backyard, to build a solid foundation for the business. For many a small fleet, it's the loads outbound from home that are the bread and butter. But you can take that same approach to the destination area, identifying shippers there and getting on the phone to make sure they know who you are and what you do. Owner-Operator Business 101 is provided by Overdrive's Partners in Business program. Go to overdriveonline.com to the Partners in Business section of the website for more detail on this and many other topics.
Brought to you by Shell Rotella, with advanced synthetic technology is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
We are Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Coming up following the bottom of the hour, a great audio cut from Scott Jennings on CNN from yesterday. Really just wrapping up a lot of the stuff that we had said, so we'll get to that. Plus, Kami, Mandani, New York City.
Yeah.
Just the insanity going on there. Wow, that's going to be fun watching that.
It is.
Observing and analyzing the insanity. Eric Harley and Gary McNamara. Nightly on Red Eye Radio.
And he's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Download our Red Eye Radio app today, and you can listen when you choose. When I was driving in, I was thinking the same thing. I just went, wow, here we are the first week. Back into the first week of shows, and the insanity is going to be worse than ever coming from the left.
Yeah.
My
here
thought
we are.
coming in going,
Yeah.
oh, boy, here we go.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's play a couple of audio cuts. This one from Scott Jennings on CNN yesterday. He really just, in this little over a minute audio cut, he really wraps it all up.
Yeah.
Here we go.
But it strikes me that we are undergoing an epidemic of political vigilantism right now. Why are people showing up in vehicles, in convoys, not just in Minneapolis, but all over the country in an effort to obstruct lawful federal law enforcement activities? This is not an isolated incident. We have had hundreds of car rammings against ICE agents all over the country. According to DHS, this lady in this car today, along with other vehicles, had been tracking ICE agents around. Why are people believing that they can drive their car into a federal law enforcement situation and that is an appropriate thing to do? I understand they don't like the fact that these agents are enforcing existing immigration law, but that's not how we change laws in this country. If you don't like a law, you talk to the politicians. You don't drive your car into the middle of a building or a law enforcement situation that's being occupied by the people who are simply there to enforce the law. If I don't like how much the IRS is charging me in taxes, I don't drive my car into the Treasury Department and try to run somebody over. I call my congressman. Political vigilantism is being encouraged by Democratic officials like the Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota, Peggy Flanagan, who earlier this year told people to, quote, put your bodies on the line, and Tim Walz calling these guys Gestapo all year. What do you think happens when you radicalize a base of people about? But it's strikes.
There you go.
Yeah. No, that's it. I mean, where do you think this is going to go?
And then we go to, let me get, this is Brad Todd, Republican strategist on CNN with Anderson Cooper. Here we go.
Well, I think that ICE needs to constantly reevaluate their tactics and the strategies and whether their officers are being trained properly on the use of excessive force. We'll find out if this was excessive force during an investigation here. But
will there be an investigation, you think?
Let's keep in mind, though, David, they're doing something we haven't done before. This country hasn't been serious about enforcing our immigration laws for a long time. And so this is new territory doing this. And they're doing so in a hostile environment. The mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey, told citizens to show up in front of ICE. He has encouraged people like Ms. Good to go out and disrupt the work of law enforcement. Minneapolis has an ordinance, in fact, that prohibits the police from even helping in crowd control. So that's, if the police had been there today and they had told Ms. Good, you got to get out of the road, you're perpendicular to a law enforcement activity, this would not have happened.
By the way, I just interviewed the mayor. He did not use the word disrupt, as far as I remember. He did say, talking about people exercising their rights to
He said,
speak
no,
out.
I'm talking about weeks ago, Anderson. He said people should show up and go protect their neighbors. He's encouraging people to go disrupt this law enforcement work. That's irresponsible.
And it is.
Yep.
And that's what they're doing. And that's why we started the show by saying, look, they want this to happen. They want to destroy the part of society that they've been elected to.
Yep. This is, again, it's all by design.
Right.
It is all by design. They want this kind of chaos. They need this kind of chaos. You know, we asked the question before Trump came back to office, how far is the left willing to go? Because we had a couple of mayors, if you remember, I think one was in Colorado. I don't remember where the other one was. There were a few mayors that were already talking about disrupting ICE. But we're not going to allow that to happen. We're not going to allow that to happen in our town. And we asked the question, how far are they willing to go? Now we've seen it. Now we've seen it over and over. Multiple attacks on ICE. And what happened yesterday is part of that. The left is Democrats are trying to make the case that, oh, she was just getting in her car and leaving. That's not the case.
No.
She weaponized her vehicle. The investigation has to play out. There has to be due process here. But the video, I believe, shows something very, very clear for that agent that was involved, that he had a right to protect his life because he felt it was in danger. We'll see what the investigation finds, but I believe I'm right on that.
But this is something, the big picture, this is something that Democrats want. They want criminals to be viewed as the victim. That's why we brought up Judge Dugan, who resigned yesterday and was angry about it. She views herself as a victim. She committed a felony in the Wisconsin court by obstructing justice with the illegal immigrant.
Yeah.
She's a judge and doesn't give a damn about the law.
Right. She's
a judge and says, well, no, the law doesn't matter. What I think matters. Yeah. I'm only going to obey the laws that I wish to follow.
Right.
And that's what's going on with Fry, with Waltz in Minnesota. And Minnesota now is without question, when you look at the fraud, the enabling of the fraud, the ignoring of the fraud, the attempt to hide the fraud that went on in Minnesota to this, it's across the board. We're not going to follow the laws. We want riots in the street. We want fraud and corruption. We don't give a damn.
Right.
And if you live in these areas, we want to make, nobody, the Democrats aren't sitting there screaming. They're screaming when Trump says, sorry, you got this much fraud. We're not going to send you money. Do you know how many young kids are going to starve because of this? Do you know how many young kids didn't get food?
Right. Yeah.
How many kids that had autism that didn't get proper care? Because
they didn't care.
Because the Democrats ignored the fraud?
Democrats didn't care anything about the kids.
They didn't care. They didn't care. All they cared about was, we're getting money back.
Yeah.
Looks like we're getting some money. Oh, they're supporting us. That's all we care about.
Yep.
I mean, all across the board, when you look at the situation in Minnesota, these politicians want their society that they've been put in charge of to become a living hell.
Yep. No, it has to be complete chaos.
Right. They don't wish to enforce the law. They wish to create their own law, not through the people. Just amazing. But they're not. I don't believe they're going to win this case politically at all.
No.
They're already losing it as when you've got as many even Democrats looking at this going, well, the rhetoric of murder, this agent committed murder, it's all horse manure. But they don't care.
No.
They don't care. And they don't care about, we've said this from the radical transgender movement, to the funds that they got, all the welfare funds and the child care funds. They don't care. They just want the money. They don't care if it goes to fraudulent people. They didn't give a damn about the children.
No.
They didn't care. They don't care about transgenders. They don't care if people are confused.
They don't care if there's a mental health crisis.
They don't care if there's a mental health crisis. They admit. Democrats are the ones that admit there's a mental health crisis here.
Yeah. Right.
They don't care if they permanently harm children. They don't care.
Nope.
Let's get this. And this is where Republicans need to be stronger and say, look, this whole thing that they pretend to care, they don't give a damn. They don't care. They don't care what happens if you allow a child to take irreversible hormone treatments or cut off body parts. They don't care what happens to them as adults.
Nope.
They don't care. So let's stop this whole thing that they...
Well, anyone who would be a proponent of children having their genitals mutilated... And by the way, how do they phrase that? gender-affirming care. No.
Yeah. Well, they've got to lie about it in order to
Right. Right.
In order to fool people.
Right. We'll call it caring. We'll call it caring.
All right, now we got to play this one audio cut here because this is really good. This is from the podcast with Sean Spicer. What's his name? This is the I can't think of the name of it. This group that whatchamacallit put together. I can't think of his name. Oh, the guy that used to be the head of ABC, the political head. This is his podcast. I got mind blank here.
Right.
But Sean Spicer's on it, and Dan Turntine's on it, and they play Sally Weaver, as we're going to call her now, because she reminds me of Kathy Griffin, the tenant head, the one that's an ultra commie.
Mark Halperin.
Mark Halperin. Yeah, it's from his podcast. He's not on it though. But here, you listen to this. Here they go. And remember, Dan is a Democrat.
Yeah.
Okay. Listen to how Dan responds to the communist stuff here. Here we go. All right.
I think the reality is that for centuries we've really treated property as an individualized good and not a collective good, and we are going to transitioning to treating it as a collective good and towards a model of shared equity will require that we think about it differently, and it will mean that families, especially white families, but some POC families who are homeowners as well, are going to have a different relationship to property than the one that we currently have.
That's, I guess, Sia. I don't know how you spell her name. CEA. Sia Weaver. She is going to be the director of New York City's Office to Protect Tenants. Dan, does the Democratic Party in America need to think about private property differently?
No, I mean, this is unbelievable. I mean, it's just, it's outrageous. It's fundamentally like un-American and communist. I mean, it really is almost reverse apartheid. I mean, that's really kind of where you're going with this a little bit.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, so Mandani's making announcements of appointments. Clearly people are going through and looking at what they've said in the past. He backed her up when presented with this information. And in some cases, previously, the Mandani administration has had people resign or announce they're not going to, continue to put their name forward. He doubled down on this person. She's I believe, 37 years old, which not, no reason a housing leader can't be young. But you look at the optics of that. I mean, that is going to be in TV commercials. You talk about the administration is going to be the Trump administration has said they're going to have a housing initiative here. Like, we'll see if it ever materializes. But the cost of housing is an issue.
There you go. But and it's funny because when he starts talking about, because he's a Democrat, and that's why she asked him, is this what Democrats are for or whatever? Sean Spicer's in the background. He's, little photo on the top right-hand corner, huge smile on his face.
Right.
Like, Dan, what do you think about this one here?
Well, and, again, with Mamdani now and this new communist movement, they're going to get on housing affordability, which they're going to jump on this idea of no one owns the right no one has the right to own your home. That's where they're going with this. This is what they want. The move from Trump on corporates, big companies buying multiple single-family homes, I've got a problem with that. We'll look at the details and we'll see how far it goes. But I've got a problem anytime any government, especially the federal government, comes in and starts dictating who has the right to own property outside of foreign nations. Like China. If China was coming up and buying a ton of real estate, there's a problem. But we'll see where the administration goes on this. But we know where the communists want to go.
We are Red Eye Radio.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
We are Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Oh, man, this is so funny. Just reading this headline here, National Review, the editor's editorial, Mamdani's commie housing official is a lunatic, is the headline.
Yeah.
And it's like they're talking about when he first, started running, and it's like all of his supporters saying, he's not a communist. And they actually put down some of the words that the people that support him were saying he is, because it's all in quotes.
Right.
Communitarian.
Communitarian.
You're a communist, but you're a humanitarian.
Right.
You combine the two words. But he's not a communist. He's a collectivist. By the way, there's no difference.
Yeah.
A democratic socialist. This one I never heard of before. A Fabian. I've never heard of that for communists.
A 60s rock and roll singer? What? What is that?
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.